About an hour after you see the movie, you may want to go see another one.
It was illegal to take Coors beer east of the Mississippi.
You know, trucking Coors beer east of Texas is bootlegging.
Smokey and the Bandit wasn't just a hit. It was a sensational box office powerhouse. It represented a distinct, high-octane Southern defiance that few movies have ever managed to emulate. The film is packed with hollering, wailing sirens, and non-stop automotive hijinks. But the true insanity unfolded behind the camera. The production crew faced a near arrest by law enforcement due to a confusing misunderstanding. A total of 4 cars were utterly wrecked. The studio itself actually detested the project, and the leading lady you associate with the film very nearly lost the part. Here are the 20 shocking facts you never knew about Smokey and the Bandit. 1. The sheriff's voice was a huge problem for television censors. However, beneath the widespread laughter and adoration, one detail caused a significant headache for the entire production, and it involved the voice of the film's most ridiculous character. When the movie was being prepared for its primetime television debut, Jackie Gleason's improvised profanity was deemed entirely too crude. The studio faced a dilemma. How could they retain the essence of Buford T. Justice without causing worried parents to change the channel? The highly unusual solution was to hire Mel Blanc, the famous voice actor behind characters like Bugs Bunny and Fred Flintstone, to dub Gleason's offensive lines. The result was a hot-tempered, furious sheriff who spoke with the distinctive voice of a Saturday morning cartoon character. For viewers who only saw the TV version, they were deprived of the original, raw intensity that Jackie Gleason poured into the dialogue. 2. A legendary director was a huge fan of the film. Perhaps the most surprising detail of all is this. The film's dedicated fan base extended far beyond average moviegoers to include one incredibly famous and unlikely figure. Among the millions of fans of Smokey and the Bandit, one name is often mentioned with shock: director Alfred Hitchcock. Yes, the master of psychological suspense, the genius behind masterpieces like Psycho and Vertigo. According to sources from the crew, Hitchcock watched the film multiple times. He reportedly lauded its fast pace, high-energy action, and humorous narrative, even calling it a perfect example of American cinema. This fact demonstrates that the film's immense appeal effortlessly transcended all genre boundaries and critical dismissals. 3. Trans Am sales soared to a record high after the film's release. But there was one thing the critics absolutely failed to predict. The movie generated a massive public craze, not just at the box office, but also at car dealerships across the United States. Pontiac's generous decision to give the film crew 4 free Trans Ams had an explosive, unforeseen consequence. It ignited a cultural phenomenon. Following the release of Smokey and the Bandit, Trans Am sales skyrocketed. The number of units sold leaped from approximately 27,000 in 1975 to a massive 68,744 in 1977, peaking at a record high of 117,108 in 1977-1979. The black and gold 1977 Trans Am, thanks to its prominent screen role, became one of the most recognizable and legendary cars in cinema history. It evolved into a powerful symbol of rebellion, speed, and effortless cool. 4. Critics scorned the film and called it outdated. Even with the new, fun, and spirited conclusion, not everyone was cheering. When the film debuted, its first judges weren't the ticket-buying public, but the professional film critics. When Smokey and the Bandit was released, critics were openly contemptuous. Roger Ebert famously awarded the film only 2 stars, while others deemed it stupid, outdated, and easily disposable. The audience, however, had an entirely opposite reaction. The film became an unforeseen box office sensation, earning over $120 million and securing its spot as the second highest grossing film of 1977, surpassed only by the cultural phenomenon Star Wars. 5. The film's original ending was darker than you think. However, if you assumed Smokey and the Bandit maintained its carefree spirit throughout, you'd be shocked by the original conclusion. It was somber, heavy, and drastically different from the final cut. Few people realize that the ending we see, with Bandit and Snowman laughing as they drive into the distance, ready for their next adventure, was not the initial plan. In the original screenplay, the movie concluded on a serious note. Bandit was finally forced to confront the harsh consequences of his reckless life, with the law ultimately closing in, suggesting an outlaw existence couldn't last forever. That original ending was dark, reflecting a heavy realism that completely undermined the movie's core message of freedom. As they prepared to shoot the finale, the entire production team sensed something was wrong. They felt the ending didn't belong, it lacked the necessary energy and humor. They all agreed that this ending failed to capture the movie they had grown to love. They made a bold, last-minute decision to discard the original script. 6. The studio demanded budget cuts, thinking the film would fail. If you thought the extensive car damage was the worst problem on set, wait until you hear that the studio, at one point, wanted to shut down the entire project. From its inception, Universal executives showed zero confidence in Smokey and the Bandit. They dismissed it as lowbrow comedy with a plot that would only appeal regionally, and they were certain it was doomed to fail. Mid-production, the studio suddenly slashed the budget, reduced staff, and imposed a tighter filming deadline, forcing the team to struggle just to complete the movie. Burt Reynolds, Jackie Gleason, and the entire crew were forced to be incredibly resourceful, using every trick they knew to continue. They recycled locations, condensed shooting schedules, and frequently relied on sheer instinct. The outcome was a dramatic irony. Smokey and the Bandit didn't just succeed, it became one of the highest-grossing films of 1977, actually outselling critically acclaimed movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Annie Hall. 7. Not a single Trans Am made it to the end of the film intact. If you thought the production's chaos was limited to the actors, you haven't heard the costly story about the Trans Ams, the movie's automotive stars. Pontiac generously supplied the film crew with 4 brand new Trans Ams, but no one foresaw that every single car would be totaled so quickly. The relentless, dramatic chases, daring jumps, and endless impacts resulted in the deformation of all 4 vehicles, one after the other. The frames bent, the suspension shattered, and some cars were barely functional after a single key sequence. When the supply of new vehicles ran dry, the crew had to scramble to keep their 4-wheeled protagonist running. They resorted to cannibalizing spare parts, quickly applying touch-up paint, and even using duct tape, holding the cars together with a mix of desperation and ingenuity. 8. The most annoying sheriff on screen was actually real. But don't assume the hamburger trick was the strangest thing about Jackie Gleason, because what's coming next will astound you even more about the film's most absurd character. Sheriff Buford T. Justice was not purely a figment of a screenwriter's imagination. The character was modeled after a real-life Florida highway patrolman whom Jackie Gleason had once encountered during a minor traffic stop. The man was loud, often rude, yet possessed a peculiar charm that Gleason never forgot. To fully embody the role, Gleason even hired a real Southern sheriff to serve as a consultant on set, meticulously studying his voice, attitude, and mannerisms. The result was not a simplistic cartoon villain, but an eerily authentic, though exaggerated, version of a real law enforcement officer. Buford T. Justice was not created in a writer's room. He was practically pulled from the back roads of the American South and thrust directly into cinematic history. 9. Jackie Gleason's mysterious drunk code. But don't assume the audio trickery was the oddest thing about the production. A strange secret code continually cropped up on set, and it always signaled that a major star was about to be in an intoxicated state. Jackie Gleason was a brilliant comedic mind, but he was equally well known for his prodigious drinking habits. Rather than openly requesting a glass of liquor, he employed a secret keyword. Whenever he desired an alcoholic drink, he would simply ask his assistant, Mal, for a hamburger. This coded request, initially meant to be private, rapidly became common knowledge and was even humorously used by other crew members. 10. The insane. But true story, Coors beer and smuggling crimes. A big rig full of Coors beer. A driver with a lead foot. A police chase spanning multiple states. Does that sound like a typical Hollywood fabrication? Believe it or not, in the 1970s, the act of smuggling Coors beer was a bona fide felony, often far more perilous than the on-screen action. At the time, Coors was unpasteurized and contained 0 preservatives, mandating that it be kept continuously cold. This necessity made transporting it beyond the western United States essentially impossible. East of the Mississippi River, Coors was considered an almost mythical, illicit commodity. You couldn't legally buy it in stores or at bars. To acquire a six-pack, you had to find someone reckless enough to take the financial and legal risk. This real-life black market directly inspired Smokey and the Bandit. The concept for the film gelled when the crew, while illegally moving the beer to the set, was stopped by police. Realizing the absurd truth that a particular brew could be deemed contraband, they decided to transform the premise into a movie. Coors was genuinely a highly coveted black market item, particularly throughout the southern US. People would actually steal it, conceal it, and even get into violent confrontations just to get a taste. Therefore, the movie's opening, where Burt Reynolds' character blasts away from the cops, wasn't far-fetched. It was essentially a dramatic depiction of a real-world pursuit. 11. The entire crew was once detained by real police for being too realistic. If you thought the Genesis story was wild, wait until you hear the trouble the film crew got into trying to reproduce one of those high-speed pursuits in real life. For one specific sequence, the Smokey and the Bandit team decided to film a chase on an isolated stretch of road. There were no cones, no official warnings, just vehicles rocketing forward and engines screaming. The action was so authentically frantic that a genuine police patrolman who happened to be driving by was convinced he had interrupted an actual illegal street race. Without a moment of hesitation, he activated his patrol lights, swerved directly into the middle of the filming, and started yelling just like a scene from an action movie. The stunt performers immediately froze, and some crew members momentarily considered fleeing. The pandemonium lasted only a few tense seconds. It required a lengthy explanation from the director and assistant directors to persuade the officer that he had inadvertently brought a movie shoot to a halt. The scene had to be reshot, but the whole crew was left with a vivid and frankly frightening memory. 12. Burt Reynolds' salary devoured a full 25% of the budget. If you thought the brush with the law was the film's only big shock, consider this. The production was already on a shoestring budget, yet 1/4 of all the money was allocated to a single individual. Who had that kind of star power? In 1977, as Smokey and the Bandit entered production, Burt Reynolds was arguably the biggest star in the world. His immense fame allowed him to demand a fee that massively exceeded industry norms, over $1 million, which accounted for 25% of Universal Pictures' original $5.3 million production cost. This staggering salary led to a palpable tension and significant resentment among the other crew members. Nevertheless, Reynolds showed up every day with an assured, irresistible charisma, choosing to ignore the constant, uncomfortable scrutiny. When the studio unexpectedly decided to slash the budget mid-production, Reynolds remained unfazed. He issued a concise, powerful threat: "If I walk, this movie is dead." The studio had no choice but to back down. Thanks to his unwavering leverage, the movie was not only completed, but soared to become the second highest-grossing film of 1977. 13. The crew didn't use special effects. Everything was raw and real. So what gave the film its raw, believable edge, drawing audiences completely into the adrenaline of every frame? The director's commitment to authenticity led him to the most extreme production decisions. Did you know that to execute the film's iconic chase sequences, the crew completely bypassed CGI or digital manipulation? It was pure old-school filmmaking, just tire rubber, flying dust, and legitimately dangerous stunts. Burt Reynolds didn't just pose in the Trans Am, he personally executed many of the high-speed stunts himself, overriding the studio's risk assessments. He constantly pushed boundaries to ensure the audience felt the most authentic cinematic thrill possible. From death-defying car leaps to near-impossible close calls, every piece of action was verifiable. Every dent, every tire skid, and every piece of metal flying off a car accurately reflected real-life damage. The danger was present, the effort was genuine, and this fierce commitment to realism is the source of the film's enduring appeal. 14. The two main actors fell in love in real life and had an unexpected ending. Amidst the dizzying speed and the perpetual clouds of dust on screen, a genuine and very romantic connection was developing on set. Is it any wonder that Burt Reynolds and Sally Field exhibited such electric on-screen chemistry? It was because they were actively engaged in a real-life romantic relationship. Off-camera, they shared a close bond, frequently ad-libbed lines, and constantly shared laughs. Their love story began right as filming started, pouring an intense vitality and spontaneity into the final movie. In her 2018 memoir, In Pieces, Sally Field detailed the passionate nature of Reynolds' pursuit. He would call her up to 10 times a day, shower her with flowers and letters, and drive across vast distances just to spend time with her. They remained a couple for close to 5 years, starred in several subsequent films together, and were seen as one of the era's definitive Hollywood power couples. However, the romance was not destined for a happy conclusion. Their relationship, which experienced many tumultuous phases over the years, eventually deteriorated and ended. 15. Most of the sheriff's lines were not in the script. While a passionate romance unfolded off-camera, another incredible source of the film's comedy came from a character who seemed destined to be a mere supporting element. Can you wrap your head around this fact? Roughly 75% of Jackie Gleason's dialogue as Sheriff Buford T. Justice was entirely unscripted. There was no prior practice or repetitive rehearsals. After simply reading the screenplay once, Gleason arrived on set and let his pure instincts guide every moment. With his famously sharp wit, Gleason continuously improvised and verbally sparred with his co-stars, creating situations that were genuinely unpredictable and side-splittingly funny. Both director Hal Needham and Burt Reynolds verified that Gleason merely skimmed the script and then completely winged the rest of his performance. This kept the on-set energy lively and full of surprises, as literally no one knew what the sheriff was going to say next. One of the film's most quoted lines, "There ain't no way that you came from my loins," was spontaneously created by Gleason on the spot, even managing to make Burt Reynolds break character and laugh. With his incredible improvisational gifts, Jackie Gleason didn't just act the role, he personified the sheriff, injecting a unique and unforgettable life into the entire movie. 16. Sally Field was almost rejected if not for the help of another person. While Jackie Gleason had the whole crew on high alert with his random dialogue, elsewhere in Hollywood, an actress was desperately fighting to secure a role that almost eluded her. When the casting process for the lead actress began, studio executives immediately vetoed Sally Field's name. She's not sexy enough, not the right look for a Southern lead, they argued. In their rigid view, Sally was merely a young actress who lacked the necessary conventional box office sizzle. But Burt Reynolds saw something fundamentally different. He was convinced of her acting talent and, more importantly, recognized a spark they didn't: her inherent intelligence, subtle charm, and authentic heart. Burt relentlessly championed her cause, willing to stake his credibility as a major star to get Sally the role, and in the end, he won the fight. That daring decision not only gave the film a flawless actress, but also sparked one of Hollywood's most celebrated romances. 17. Jerry Reed was the last choice but became a legend. In another corner of the production, there was an individual who wasn't on the initial list, but miraculously found his way onto the screen, becoming an iconic and irreplaceable figure. Did you know that Jerry Reed was not the first actor considered for the part of Snowman? In fact, he was only cast the night before filming was scheduled to start. The studio had contacted a lengthy list of well-known musicians and actors, but all of them either turned down the role or failed to work out. With time critically short, Burt Reynolds personally intervened, insisting on Jerry Reed, not just for his acting, but for his extraordinary musical composition skills. Arriving on set with literally no time for preparation, Reed immediately put on his cowboy hat, grabbed his guitar, and got to work. It was during this impromptu period that he composed and recorded the indelible song Eastbound and Down right on location. What started as a hurried temporary fix became a pivotal moment in cinema history. Reed did more than just play a trucker. He infused the character with the genuine rhythm, spirit, and uninhibited freedom of the American South. 18. The fun fact behind the dog, Fred. Because there was another star who had no representation and likely didn't even grasp that he was in a movie. Can you guess who this unexpected star was? Given the severe budget limitations for Smokey and the Bandit, the crew decided against hiring a pricey professional animal handler. Instead, they organized a casual local animal contest, with Burt Reynolds taking on the role of judge. Multiple dogs were considered, but at the very last minute, just before filming commenced, Burt called and declared that they should select Fred the Basset Hound, the competition's winner. Fred's appeal was based on an unexpected quality: he didn't obey instructions. This refusal to conform to the script perfectly matched the laid-back, unpredictable nature of the Snowman character, cementing Reynolds' choice. And just like that, a four-legged cinema icon was created. 19. The phrase, son of a, was actually a real-life mispronunciation. Do you think that's the most bizarre behind-the-scenes detail? There's an even more surprising revelation that originated from one of the film's signature lines. Did you know that the character name Buford T. Justice and his infamous catchphrase were both inspired by a real-life figure? Burt Reynolds' father, a former police chief in Riviera Beach, Florida, knew a state patrolman who had a habit of mispronouncing the vulgar term son of a bitch as summa bitch, a distinctive guttural Southern twist. Jackie Gleason, who played Buford T. Justice, immediately adopted this verbal tic and incorporated it into his performance, transforming it into one of the film's most classic bits of dialogue. What makes this so remarkable is that the line was not in the original script, but was an invention of Gleason's improvisational genius. 20. The sound of the Trans Am was actually from a different car. But that's not the most intriguing secret yet. There's another surprise, and it involves the film's automotive legend. If you ever thought the engine roar of the Trans Am in the movie didn't sound exactly like a real Trans Am, your ears were right. To craft the powerful, unmistakable sound for the Bandit's car, the production team utilized the recorded sound effects of a completely different vehicle. Specifically, they used the distinct sounds of a 1955 Chevrolet Custom, a car that had also been featured in classic movies such as Two-Lane Blacktop and American Graffiti. And so, Smokey and the Bandit became more than simply a chase comedy. It evolved into a cultural phenomenon where a summa-bitch sheriff could unexpectedly sound like Fred Flintstone, and audiences were none the wiser. You probably never anticipated a high-speed comedy could harbor so many bizarre behind-the-scenes stories. Which of these strange or shocking facts surprised or entertained you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to follow the channel to uncover more never-before-revealed truths from the history of Hollywood.